I'm so excited to kick us all off. Here we are in session one, school redesign or school design. Today we're going to be focusing on building the case for redesign. So really, what is redesign and why now is the right time to do it, engage in it. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to my colleague and CEO, Devin, to do some introductions. And Devin, do you want to introduce the panelists?
Sure. Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Devin Vedichka, co-CEO of Learner-Centered Collaborative, and thrilled to have with me two of my former colleagues and two amazing leaders, Brianna Norton from Escondido Union School District and Eric Shigela from Vista Unified School District. And we will get to know them much better as we go through the conversation this morning. And then our co-host for today is Brittany Griffin. You've heard her voice. She's here with us at Learner-Centered Collaborative. And it's great to see so many familiar names and some new ones in the chat. We really are extremely grateful that you're able to join us today. And please be sure to just, add questions that you have in the chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible, which is one of the reasons we started in breakouts. We always like to start with connections before we jump into the content. So I'm going to share just a little bit about Learner-Centered Collaborative, and then I'm going to turn it over to a collaborator of ours from LPI. LPI is partnering with us on this webinar series. And so at Learner-Centered Collaborative, we're a national nonprofit organization. And I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but I do just want to point out to you that we have a vision for the future of education ecosystems where all learners know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. And this is the future that we hope to co-create together with each of you. And in order to do that, we know that we're going to need to define whole learner outcomes, design meaningful learning experiences, and create the enabling conditions for learner-centered education. And today we're really going to be leaning into this co-design element of the services that we provide, which include developing coherence, building capacity, and measuring impact as well. And if you go to the next slide, we've had the great privilege to collaborate and to partner with more than 100 school systems with really deep multi-year partnerships with more than 30 school systems serving more than 250,000 students. And you can see over 10,000 educators across the United States. And a lot of what we're going to share with you today is based on those experiences that we have through our partnership network. And this slide is very brief. It's not even comprehensive, but just gives you a glimpse into some of the collaborators that we have the privilege to work with. And some of you are on this call today, including Akiba Yavna and others. And so we're just thrilled to be able to connect with each of you on this journey to co-create and co-design a brighter future for all learners. One thing that I'll point out is that, we put collaborative in the name of our organization because we know that it's going to take networks and many of us working together from different perspectives, different settings to create the changes that we would like to see in the future. And central in that, of course, is school design, which is one of the things we'll be talking about. But we know that the change process is extremely complex and will require each of us to lean into it and to be architects of this brighter future. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say is that it is really important for us to be centering on learners and young people in particular, but we use the term learner-centered because each of us as adults as well are also learners. And when we really listen to learners, it creates an expanded sense of possibility. And I think that when you hear the stories of the school design journeys at Vita and at Hidden Valley, this idea of beginning with learners hopefully is going to be reinforced and emphasized and elevated, and something that we should be coming back to throughout this series of conversations. And this is the first of a 4-part series. We hope that you'll join us for each. We hope that you'll bring a team to each. We think it'll be extremely valuable for you to have some collaborators to join you on the journey. And today we're really going to be talking about the case for redesign. The second in the series, each of these will be happening 1 week apart. So each Monday for the next 4 weeks, we'll be having these convenings. Next week, we'll be talking about mapping your ecosystem, doing some asset mapping, talking about listening to learners. Then we'll get into the design process. And then lastly, we'll be planning for impact. And so each of these conversations will hopefully be building on one another. And we hope that you can join us for all of them, but please feel free to join for any if you're available. And some outcomes that we'd like to hold central. There are some practical outcomes in terms of what you'll have at the end of this. And so by the end of this series, you should have a documented vision of your redesign priorities. You should have an understanding of your assets to build on, so you're not starting from scratch. And you should have identified some clear next steps. And experientially, it's important, going back to that ecosystem idea, this network concept, that you feel like you're connected with one another, that you're part of a community. And we also want you to feel like your questions are heard and that we're responding to those, and that your ideas, your contributions are valued along the way, because each of you are bringing in so many strengths into this process. And so I think I'll turn it over right now to my colleague, Charlie Thompson from LPI, who's going to talk to you for a moment about their redesigning high schools features and some other exciting developments at LPI. So take it away, Charlie.
Thanks, Devin. Hi, friends. I am Charlie Thompson. I'm at the Learning Policy Institute, which is what LPI stands for. And in the fall of 2024, we released this report, Redesigning High Schools, the 10 Features for Success. And this webinar series is in part meant to make the connection between the work that Learner-Centered Collaborative has been doing and the Redesigning High Schools work that we are trying to support. Back to the point of the ecosystem, there is an ecosystem of folks who are all trying to support different types of redesign. And I'm going to talk about the 10 features of redesign in a second, but it's not going to be the most groundbreaking 10 features that you've ever seen. It might even look like 10 features that feel like what school should look like. And so this report launched our Center for School and System Redesign, where we're trying to bring together a lot of the folks in the broader ecosystem who are trying to rethink, redesign, and reimagine school to do it better. That's my wild pitch. Would someone be able to press the next button so I can talk about the 10 features? Amazing. Thank you. So like I said, this is not rocket science. These 10 features are pretty foundational to what we know, what the science of learning and development indicates young people need in order to thrive. They need positive developmental relationships, a safe and inclusive school climate, culturally responsive and culturally sustaining teaching, deeper learning curriculum with authentic assessments that are coherent with and part of that curriculum, a student-centered pedagogy to help them do that learning process, well-supported and well-prepared educators, authentic family engagement, community connections, and integrated student supports. And the foundation, I actually don't think of these 10 features as like a hierarchical prioritized list. I think of them as kind of a web of things that support one another. And I think that as you embark upon your redesign journey, you'll probably see the same thing. You might start somewhere that isn't number one, but really try to build out all 10 features over time. And the 10th feature at the bottom is really foundational, is that shared decision-making structure. It's not just between principals and teachers, but we're talking families and the broader community and students as well. And so how do we get everyone on the same page so that we're rowing in a sustainable direction? And so we're hoping that this series will be an introduction to the school and system redesign work that can help you kind of dip a toe into this world if you're very, very new, or else deepen the work that's already happening at your school or district. And we're hoping that this report and the research, policy, and practice support that we provide through the Center for School and System Redesign can become a framework that supports schools and districts across the country to reimagine learning environments for young people that reflect what the science of learning and development says that they need. Strong supportive relationships with peers and adults, deep and engaging and appropriately challenging learning opportunities in the classroom and beyond, reciprocal and authentic relationships with families and the broader community, and educators who have the preparation and support to deliver on all of these needs. If you like what I'm saying and you want to stay in touch with LPI, you can always email me at cthompson. I realize I can't drop this in the chat. I had planned to drop this in the chat. So if you really want to talk to me, you're going to have to take out a pen and paper or write this down somewhere. But it is C, my first initial, and then Thompson, my last name, at learningpolicyinstitute.org. It's a long one. If you have questions, you can always talk to the folks who helped you sign up for this webinar and they can put us in touch. Oh, thank you, Brittany. And the last thing is we are launching a newsletter next week that is going to help kind of bring all of these pieces together. If you'd like to be a part of that, please send me an email. And just lastly, thank you to the Learner Center Collaborative. The partnership with y'all has been fantastic, and I'm really excited for where this series is going to go. So with that, thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. We appreciate the collaboration, and I think it really underscores the importance of this network concept when we have the opportunity to collaborate with amazing organizations like Learning Policy Institute. So thank you for the partnership, and I'm going to do a little bit more framing before we jump into the panel conversation, but just to give you a sense of the flow for the day, after we do some panel discussion, we'll put you back into breakout rooms to do some reflection, and then we'll do some closing and previewing of next steps. So keep going. I want to just share the learner-centered ecosystem framework that we use in many of our partnerships, and want to give a lot of credit to co-founder, co-CEO, Dr. Katie Martin, who's the brilliant mind behind this model. And we recently released a white paper, which I'm sure we'll be able to share with you. But this is drawn from an ecological model of change from Bronfenbrenner, and it really shows how all of these different elements are interconnected. And when we think about system change, the way that we view it is we need to begin with what are we trying to achieve? What are those whole learner outcomes that are most important? And from there, how do we implement and design a learning model that aligns with those outcomes that we're trying to achieve? So small example would be if an outcome that you hold as central is collaboration, your learning model needs to then give your learners experiences to actually connect and collaborate with one another. From there, it's important that the school itself is designed in a way to create those learning experiences that will drive to those outcomes. And schools don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of systems as well. And so the enabling conditions are important drivers of the school design, the learning model, all moving towards the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then culture, of course, permeates everything. And in the culture area, we think a lot about a learner-centered mindset, learner-centered paradigm, relational trust. We think about collective efficacy, and we have a lot of additional information about each of these elements. But we share this as kind of global framing, because in this series, we're going to be digging into school design, and that school design is not disconnected, in our view, from the outcomes, the learning model, the enabling conditions, the culture, and yet it's a really important dimension or element of the change process that we want to take a deep dive into. So some examples of whole learner outcomes that we've been able to see in the field. We see a lot of the development of learner portraits, graduate profiles. They go by different names, but they tend to identify a key number of core outcomes that tend to represent that whole learner development. And so this is the knowledge, skills, mindsets that are critical for learners to thrive in life, work, and citizenship. And you see that they're expressed differently in various communities. Escondido, which is the district that one of our panelists is from, is in the bottom right. Laguna Beach next to that. So there are some unique ways that they articulate the outcomes, and there are also some common patterns. And these outcomes often emerge from a series of community conversations, listening to young people in particular, activating their hopes and desires as a core part of this process. But it's important that we hold these outcomes in mind as we get into the conversation about school design. And learning model, as I mentioned, needs to be organized in support of the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And community is central to that. In our experience, we find that systems tend to organize themselves around authentic learning, competency-based learning, personalized learning as part of that community-based process. And as we mentioned, learners is a term we use intentionally because we think educators are also learners. And so our own development as educators is central in this process. And school design, this is where we're going to be spending most of our attention through this series. It's really important that we think about the school structures that are intentionally designed to support the learner-centered practices we're trying to achieve. And in the center of the school design process is a clear identity, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit. But we also see, regardless of the different models that end up emerging in various communities, that schools that are oriented to these whole learner outcomes almost invariably organize themselves into small learning communities. They emphasize real-world learning. They orient to performance assessment. They have systems and structures for ongoing and embedded teacher collaboration, and they distribute leadership, knowing that none of us can do this by ourselves. Enabling conditions, as I mentioned, schools are part of systems, and so these systems have drivers as well. And so these are the conditions necessary to support the development of the whole learner outcomes. Coherence is critical. How do we organize our systems intentionally in a way that's mutually reinforcing? Commitment, how are you making these commitments explicit? Alignment of your systems, including things like resource allocations, but many other systems as well. Talent development and growth is important. And then partnerships, which transcend beyond the school or the school system, but also out into the community. You heard that was something that Charlie really emphasized. And all of this, by the way, is not like flipping a light switch. The evolution process is ongoing. It's iterative, and it is a cycle. It is a process that reorients to the outcomes that are most important: the vision, the mission, the values, the portrait or profile of a learner, the implementation of that learning model, clear goals and outcomes, and then moving into the change process itself. I think you'll hear from our panelists that this is not just a simple process. It is something that you go through many times, and it is an ongoing journey. And so with that framing, we're going to have a little panel conversation. And maybe to start, I'll begin with Brianna. But Brianna, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, your role, maybe say a little bit about the school community in which you work as well.
Great. So hi, I'm Brianna Norton. I am the principal at Hidden Valley Middle School. This is my third year. We are a Title I school. All of our students are 100% free and reduced lunch. We have approximately 18 to 20% of our students receive special education services. And we have about 750 to about 790 middle school students, grades 6 through 8.
Wonderful. And Eric Shigela, do you mind just saying who you are? You can talk about your current role, but then also, if you don't mind, going back in time and describing a little bit about what Washington Middle School was like before we went through the school design process to create VITA.
Sure. Thanks, Devin. My name is Eric Shigela. I'm currently an assistant superintendent in Vista Unified School District, where Devin once was superintendent. And when he was superintendent in our district, there was a school called Washington Middle School, 98% poverty, about the same percentage for Latinx students, about 25% special education rate, about 80% English language learners, and one of the lowest performing middle schools in the state of California. Also one of the most violent, so to speak, middle schools in our region. We're about 40 miles north of the southern US border with Mexico. And so we have a lot of migrant students that come through, a lot of transiency, high rates of homelessness. And Devin hired me with the implicit task of redesigning the school. And so we were able to do that, really leaning into the community and teacher leadership. And now that school, it's called the Vista Innovation Design Academy. The acronym is VITA, and VITA means life in Spanish. And based on the demographics and the little bit of the story I told you, you can see why that might be really important. And so we only go by VITA, and the hope was that students and staff would see this more as part of their lives and who they are than just going to school or going to work.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to stick with you, Eric, for a minute. So yes, we had a chance we worked together. Brianna and I also worked in the same district with Eric many years ago. And Brianna, by the way, was involved in the redesign of Vista High School when it won a $10 million XQ Super School Prize. So she's not new to the school redesign process. And these are two of the best school designers, architects of change that are out there. And so really, really thrilled that we're able to have this conversation. But Eric, if we stick with you for a minute. So you talked about how when you were brought in as principal and I was superintendent, you were brought in with a mandate to redesign the school. And you talked a little bit about some of the challenges at Washington. But can you talk a little bit more about why redesign was the right strategy? Like, why did we have to make such radical changes at the school? What was like the core problem that we were trying to solve?
I think the core problem was a lack of any positive student achievement and learning. And so when we look at any sort of academic success measures, some of the things that we looked at when we got into the mix of it all was as the school was creating more and more interventions for students, the academic achievement based on standardized state and local assessments was actually going down. And at the same time, that interventions were going up for students. So more middle-class white people doing things to poor Latinx youth. As they were doing more of that and academics was going down, there was also a correlation for a rise in discipline issues that were happening at the school. And so it was this perfect storm of opportunity to actually do something and reset opportunity for kids in our neighborhood and to help defeat generational poverty in our community.
Yeah. And one more question for you, Eric, before I bring it back to Brianna. But, you were a new principal at the time. I was a relatively new superintendent. Can you just talk a little bit about like the emotional state at the early stages of that change process? What did it feel like to be a new principal going through that process?
Yeah, I think it was highly emotional in terms of excitement, but anxiety and opportunity. I was something we haven't mentioned yet, Devin, is that I was the sixth principal in 7 years at that school. So a carousel of leaders coming through. In fact, my first day on the job there was February 13th, 2013. I was the third principal that school year. And so, amongst the excitement, but also the anxiety, was this deep sense of needing to tap into culture and the human side of things in order for the parents and the students and the staff, the teachers and support staff, just to trust that we could do something and that someone would stick around and tend to and care for the community alongside them, not on top of them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Brianna, as I mentioned, you're not new to the school design journey. You've been through before, but in Escondido and at Hidden Valley, new setting. Can you talk a little bit about like why you felt like school redesign was was the right strategy at Hidden Valley?
So it's so interesting because, you know, Eric was talking to just a sense of like needing to take care of the staff and this like social emotional need. And when I came into that school, our staff and our students were completely disenfranchised. The kids were, I mean, I tell people like there was no process and procedure at that point when I took this school over. And our teachers were very upset. They were very saddened. Our teachers weren't even coming out of their classrooms at that point in time, just because of kind of the chaos that was happening on that campus. And so for the first year, it was, again, taking care of climate and culture on our campus. You know, we have to take care of those Maslow needs before we can ever bloom. And fortunately, I landed in Escondido, and Redesign was starting to come to the forefront. They had already done some work around a learning model and a learner profile. And once I realized that, and actually my first day on the job 3 years ago, I was like, we can do this. Like, this is a perfect opportunity for our staff, because at the end of the day, our staff had the biggest heart, and our kids were the most resilient kids I've ever seen. And so it was such an amazing opportunity and timing, and listening to our students and the needs that they had, and also listening to the staff. I literally met with every single certificated member, opened the door for all of our classified, asked a set of 8 questions to help them like kind of lay that information on the table, but also to say, hey, we're going to come together and really identify with our students what their needs are, what they're looking for at school, and really tapping into the passions of our teachers, but really more importantly of our students. And how do we do that again as a team? And so it's taken us this 3rd year, but I'm sure we'll get into that more. We took a micro school approach, but yes.
Yeah, I love it. Well, one thing that's, you know, sort of a commonality between your 2 schools are these these could be described as turnaround efforts. These are communities where the perceptions were that these were schools that were not thriving, where learners were disengaged, where staff members were disengaged. So part of what I think is important as we listen to the evolution of these learning communities is, you know, change is possible everywhere and anywhere. And when you see the success of Vita, which is now 10 years old, Eric?
11, going on 11
years old, and Hidden Valley, which is, you know, just a couple of years into the change journey, you see that this is happening in communities across the country, and we're learning a lot about how to move through this process. So staying with you, Brianna, for a moment, when you started on the school redesign journey, what were you thinking were the success indicators? Like, how would you know if this was going to be working?
So I think there's just some informal and formal ways to look at that. Like, if we're talking about data specifically, I can tell you this year we pulled a lot of our information, and our bullying reports on our campus this year, comparatively speaking to last year, went down over 50%. Our out of school suspensions went down this year 65%. We might be at 64, but 65%. We are now starting to have an increase in the curriculum through our PBL lens. But if you're looking at something that's not data, like when I went on that campus, kids would not even say good morning to you. And it's not an exaggeration. They would not say hello. They would not look at the adults. They would not interact with the adults. And let's just be honest, vice versa. The adults were not interacting with the kids in and around campus. Our kids are in class. They are engaged. Before, that sounds like a very small, like, point of like pointing out, but like our kids didn't want to be in class. My first year, we were just trying to get them into class because they were so disengaged. You come onto our campus now, our kids are in class, they're excited, they're learning, you know, we have a wellness course, they're doing PBLs, we have a wellness center that we set up. We do an innovation lab that we're about to launch. We've got college and career going on. But honestly, we've also done things after school that now engage our kids, whether it's MMA boxing, whether it's ballet folklorico, whether it's culinary, because let's just be honest, every single middle school kid wants to eat all the time, right? So like when we sit there and we listen to our kids and what they want and what they're interested in, like those are readers as well. The data, yes, but also the culture and the climate when you walk onto our campus is night and day from 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And
So
student leadership, by the way, Devin, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like
go.
we literally we literally started, one of the first things in our year was really doing like not just ASB but web. And our teachers and our students came together, and our motto is Leaders of Escondido. So it was all about how do we empower our learners to come to the forefront of leading our school and being the voice of our school. And I think that at the core of it is like the most important. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And what I hear in all of that is you had a real mix of some kind of qualitative indicators, including things like, you know, what do we observe about student behavior, how they interact with one another at the school. And you were tracking some quantitative metrics as well, whether they related to discipline or, you know, other climate indicators. And I know you also were tracking your academic achievement, which we'll talk about as well. But you had kind of a wide set of indicators that you were thinking about to kind of inform the success journey. Eric, we'll go back to you. Like at the early stages of the Vita journey, what were you thinking success would look like?
So, like Brianna mentioned with her 8 questions, we spent a ton of time. We used design thinking or liberatory design models. And so spent a lot of time in empathy interviews and trying to figure out the school was broken. Why was it broken? What was it, not just like the test scores and not just the discipline rates, but like at the core of it. And so we sat down with current students, with moms, with alumni, with every single staff member. There's a convenience store on the corner. It's called a 7-Eleven. We went down to 7-Eleven because they hated Washington Middle School because every day after school they got ransacked. And so trying to figure out what we came to learn was that poor Latinx youth didn't see themselves in what was happening to them at school. And so we had to flip that script. And Bree kept talking about engagement. And we said something, and you know, Devin was superintendent, so top of the organization, but some of the middle management in the bureaucracy part didn't understand this and gave us a little bit of a hard time because we said engagement was going to become our first intervention. And you know, well, engagement, that's not a program. You can't buy it. It's not on the state approved list of interventions. What do you mean by that? And what we meant is that every single student had to see themselves in a purpose and connection to what they were doing and allowed to explore and learn at school to something greater than the now. And teachers, we wanted them to feel like they wanted to jump out of bed and run to school in the morning to be a part of what we were doing. And so I think the question was around success measures of what we were thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, discipline was great because 90% reduction in suspensions first year, 72% reduction in classroom referrals first year, went from 7 mandatory by law expulsions to 0 in the first year. And so what we were looking for wasn't just those things though, it was also this idea, and Devin sort of brought it up. Can you have a line of people waiting outside the door to come to your school? And within 3 years, we had 1,000 people applying for 250 spots at the school. And very quickly, we hit gentrification because there was such an overwhelming number of people who could drive into the community to get that. Because what turns out, what you design for the poorest of the poor kids in California, actually the middle class families are seeking those things that you're talking about. Because when you're talking about defeating generational poverty, a lot of working class parents also see that as they are worried about falling out of the middle class, and they see those same types of ways in learning as a preventative measures to help their students be able to have a living wage and meaningful life in our community.
Yeah, love that. And in our elements of school design, we at the center of that is clear identity. And so, Eric, you talked a little bit about design thinking became an anchor for you in the change process, the redesign process. Can you talk a little more about kind of how you came to that identity and how choices that you made through the redesign process? You mentioned the name already, but you know, the logo, the gills, just talk about how you reinforce that clear identity in that redesign process.
Yeah, we came about design thinking in general under your leadership. Our math team in the district was doing a lot of work with Stanford Professor Joe Bowler, and some of our math teachers were out having wine with her, and they're bemoaning the fact that they had just gotten their third principal for the year, and while he seemed like a nice guy, they weren't sure that he knew what he was doing or how we were going to do this entire redesign type thing, because we had a very tight timeline to do so. And she just offered, she said, you know, there's this place at Stanford called the Institute of Design, also known as the D School, and they follow this human-centered approach called design thinking. You guys should check it out. And so they did. They're like, oh, this sounds great. He doesn't have any ideas. We don't have any ideas. And so they sent it to me, and I looked at him like, empathy? We're going to start with empathy to change this massive problem that we have. But like the teacher said, he didn't have any better ideas, nor did they. And so we dug into this and we started using the design thinking process. And today people will call it liberatory design, but this is going back now 12 years ago. We started using it in and amongst ourselves as adults. And what we realized very quickly is the relational trust that was developing between the administration and the teachers, and the high level of creative ideation and ideas and possibility that were just blooming all over the place. Like, we have got to use this process to reimagine the school and how we did it. So that became the anchor of who we are. And then, of course, like, you know, identity and brand acknowledgement and understanding your story and who you are and how you fit into things is incredibly important, often undersold or misdone in schools today. You know, you can't just slap a new mascot on. We even got told because one of the joys of our stories, and Bree's in the same boat, same building, same teachers, same kids. It wasn't, we're not a startup charter that just, you know, got to go, and we didn't close down a school. We basically renamed a school. And we had community members who very meanly were saying in public meetings when we were trying to explain what we were doing, said, same teacher, same building, same kid, you're putting lipstick on a pig. And so that idea sometimes gets done where schools will contact me. They're like, hey, we want to change our mascot because we want to rebrand the school because we have XYZ problems. And that technical change doesn't do anything unless it's tied in to the adaptive things that you're trying to do through design. And so we used actually the mascot opportunity as marketing. You know, there's a new school and we need a new mascot. What should it be? And we did a community-wide vote. And once we had the Sharks and it was voted, 2 votes over, winning out from the Grizzlies. And then we started digging in, like, you know, what is special and significant about Sharks? Well, our core values became our GILs, and GILs is an acronym, but Vida means life in Spanish. Sharks was our mascot. The way that sharks breathe is through their gills. Their gills allow for life in the shark to happen. And so we started creating these narratives that really were sharp and concise and clear about what we were doing and the meaning and the power behind it all.
Yeah, and that clear identity is so important as you're going through the design journey to know what are you holding firm and where are you flexible, because the change process is challenging. And as you said, you know, there are cynics, there are skeptics. It's an emotional process. It's not an easy journey, but that clear sense of identity feels so important. And Bree, in your case, you ended up taking the route of creating a micro school, a school within a school. Can you talk a little bit about why you made that choice and how that has been a good starting point into a comprehensive change strategy for Hidden Valley?
It's so funny. My background also high school teacher, but also as an athletic director and girls basketball coach. So when people ask me this question, I always say it's kind of like a philosophy of how you do innovation or redesign, right? Do you shoot the basketball on the side of your head, or do you shoot it in front of you? Micro school, do you do like, do you take the small approach, or do you do the whole school at one time? And for us, and what our staff needed, and what our students needed, was really this micro school approach, because I sent it out to my staff, early adopters, who's on board, who wants to try some innovative things. And we started there because it intentionally allowed this group of teachers. So we started with our 7th grade, because if anybody is in middle school, you know that 7th grade is the toughest grade of the middle school time frame. And so we took our core content teachers, math, science, English, history. They had the same group of about, I would say, 150 students that they worked with. And they were given permission. And I think as a leader, this is what's really important when you're working with your teachers on your campus, is giving them permission to try things. And also telling them it's okay if it fails. We're gonna learn. It's okay if it succeeds. But in all of this, our kids are going to learn, and you are going to learn in that process. And so it was important to do it this way. Also, collective efficacy, and also the distributed leadership and us doing it together. But now that micro school team now leads and tells the rest of our staff about what worked really well. And they also are like, this sucked. Like, we did not do well on this part with our kids. And so it's not me up there leading it, it's the teachers and the staff leading this design change. And that is what is really, really important. And also alongside that, with that micro school approach, I also gave permission if any of our other teachers in the 6th or 8th grade wanted to try things. Most of them didn't at first, but once they start seeing some of these successes of our micro school team and them talking about it, it just naturally lent itself to teachers becoming more and more comfortable starting this process. And our micro school, we just did it for this was our first year. So just to give you context, last year around spring, we were approached to try this micro school model, which, funny enough, my assistant soup at that time said, hey, we want you to do this micro school. And I'm like, awesome, I'm pretty sure I understand it. But then I called Devin and I'm like, Devin, help break this down for me so I really make sure I'm understanding it, because I think I know, but I really need to make sure I know. And so my teachers spent all of that time planning, and they came in this school year. So really, this is the first iteration that we've done. And they've already, seen some great successes, but so is the rest of our staff. And you have this buy-in that's occurring, and everyone is really excited about this work. And we've had some awesome things that have happened. So.
And you, Brianna, you talked about it, the early adopters. And so one of the things that I like about a micro school model is you can activate the agency, that we have the choice. You can lean into the energy that's there with your innovators and early adopters that are ready for a particular kind of change. And then they become the champions for the next wave of change. But can you talk a little bit about, at the early stages of launching this micro school, you weren't sure if you would get teachers that would volunteer to opt into this. You weren't sure if you would get students that would volunteer to opt into it. What was that like? What were you hoping to achieve in terms of number of volunteers, and what did you actually end up with?
Yeah, so there's always that fear, right? When you're doing this, you're like, okay, we've kind of been talking about, doing some redesign. And honestly, I sent it out to our staff, and then I call them hallway conversations. It was then just being out with my staff, answering questions. People wanted to know more. Well, what does it look like? The typical, well, what's the, kind of the demand, or what's the responsibility of us going to be? Let's just keep it real. How much extra work is there going to be in this? And that's really important, though, as teachers, when you're trying to teach in that classroom. That's why I go back to they were given permission to create, but also as a leader, it was extremely important to provide the release time for these teachers to do the work. This isn't something that can be done after hours. I mean, you could, but you're going to burn your teachers out. Let's just be honest. And so We really provided the opportunity when they needed a release day, or they needed a couple hours, or they needed to talk to a different expert. I said yes, and I found that support that they needed. And that was really important as we were creating, because I also knew once they had started this and built out the PBLs, they built out this wellness course, the next group or grade level that did it, it would be quicker, faster, more efficient. And Devin, what was the other? I don't know if I answered that full
What were
question.
you hoping in terms of number of volunteers, and what did you end up with?
So I intentionally sent it out as just a grade level. And so I intentionally said, hey, we are looking for, 4 content area teachers. And so, and for 7th grade, which kind of limited it. I was looking for 4. I think we got 5 or 6 that really were interested in it. But I also got interest from other teachers that just said, hey, I'm not 7th grade, but can we try things? Can
And
we start it?
what about on the student side? How many students were you hoping would opt into this, and how many actually signed up?
So, funny enough, we did not do an opt-in. So, which was very intentional and very strategic. We let all of our families know that we were going to be doing this. We also let our families know, like, this is the direction that we're headed. We had meetings with our PTA, our SSC. We were doing a lot of communication, getting feedback from our parents. We did parent day at lunch. We made it informal for our parents. Surveys work sometimes, but they just needed to write it up when they were here. We had a captive audience. We're just pen and paper. And so we were doing a lot of just work on the forefront. So when we launched this, we didn't get any pushback. Not one parent gave us pushback for their student being in this micro school, which I think is huge. And I think a big kudos to our staff and our teachers and our kids for just being open to try new things. But when you put our kids in the driver's seat and our teachers and our community, that's what makes it work. So
yeah. So there are these patterns, these themes in each of your stories around really engaging the expertise and the energy of your staff in the process. And Brianna, I love how you talked about providing time for them to do that. I know that's a big part of the Vita story as well. And that teacher collaboration time is one of the elements of our school design process, because it has to be there for schools to go through this process effectively. And I know we're going to move into breakout rooms in a moment, but maybe last question, and I'll start with Eric. But you talked about how at the beginning it felt kind of scary and exciting. It's 10 years into it. You've been promoted. You're now an assistant superintendent. If you can just kind of talk about, like, how do you feel about that redesign journey now, and what advice do you have for other leaders that might be at the early stages or middle stages where it's a little messy? How do you feel now about it, and what's your advice for leaders? Those are the 2 questions.
I say, other than being a husband and a dad, that Vita is the most significant thing I've ever done in my life. And through all the stress and the hard and all the things, absolutely worth it when you see the impact is centrally located in a city like Vista, a city very much like where Bree is in Escondido. I actually went to middle school at the school that Bree is principal of, so I love the story. And I think one of the big things too, and I'm not sure this addresses your question, but that I want to get out there, is one of the ways. So we were on this parallel path where we knew that kids were disengaged, didn't care, weren't connected, but we also had to reinsure that the adults were engaged. And one of the ways that we did that intentionally in our redesign is we asked teachers, what have you always wanted to do with kids that you've never been allowed to do because of state credentialing or like whatever the thing is? And then how do we use our creative design process in order to tackle that? And that was uplifting to the souls of so many people.
Love that. Thank you. And Bree, you're a little earlier in the journey, just a couple of years into it. But how do you feel now, and what's your advice for other leaders?
Really excited. one of the things I talking about with leaders, or like where I'm at currently, is like, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. I also say flexibility. You have to be flexible, and you have to be able to change or pivot on different things. Say yes to everything that you can. Like, yes is really important. I say yes to every single thing possible. Sometimes I get a little pushback from the district, but they've been great in supporting me. And I think it's really important when you're innovating, to find your people. Who are your people? Because sometimes it can be really lonely. Sometimes, full transparency, it can feel like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain. And it's really important just to have people even outside of your district that you can go to and ask questions, or just be in the presence of greatness of other people and just be able to learn from them. Because sometimes at the end of the day, it's really important to know, like, there are other people doing this work, and this work matters, and they are seeing the same amount of change and success, because at the end of the day, it comes back to our kids. And that's all that matters. And so I don't take no either. That's probably one of my big things. If someone says no to something, I'm like, okay, not yet. Not yet. We'll get there, right? So those would be my big things. Living in it right now. So
Love it. Love it. Well, I so appreciate the two of you. And we're going to go into breakout rooms and let you reflect a little bit. And then after the breakout rooms, we'll come back together as a whole group and just do a little bit of closing out. But, if we can just appreciate Eric and Brianna quickly, thank you so much for your leadership, for all that you do for kids, all that you do for communities, society. You are tremendous, tremendous learner-centered leaders, and really, really grateful for all that you do. And with that, I think Brittany will give us some directions for the breakout rooms.
You got it. Thanks, Devin. Wow, I'm just soaking in all the wisdom and good advice and great ideas that were just shared. And I assume that you might also be in that space. So we wanted to reflect, make meaning, digest all of that in community. And unlike the first breakout room, because we've invited you all to join in teams, we're going to try an experiment. I'm going to invite you all to debrief and make meaning with your team. So there are two prompts. There's going to be a slide in your breakout room that you can update to capture your thinking. But I want you to take a moment and just, based on the school design structures that we introduced, along with the stories that you heard from Brianna and Eric, where is there already energy that you want to build upon in your school? And what opportunities or gaps exist that you might want to lean into, explore, and address? So those will be your two prompts: identifying where there's energy, identifying where there's opportunity. And as I mentioned, in that webinar workbook, each breakout room has their own slide. So in a moment, I'll show you which breakout room to be a little different. You'll get to pick your room. And so in the slide deck, you'll scroll down, and I believe we've got, go back and I'll tell you the exact number, slides 22 to 30 are some of those visuals that we talked through, those school design structures that you heard Eric and Brianna talking about. So we wanted to give you those so you could continue to chew on them. And then slides 31 and beyond is where you'll find these breakout room slides. So really, if you just start on slide 22, you'll be in good shape. That link will be back in the chat for you in just a moment. And this is the breakout room spread. Now, if you're panicked and you're like, oh, I'm the only one here from my organization, don't worry at all. You have a couple of different rooms for solo participants. So I created 5 rooms for solo participants just in case there's a bunch of you and you didn't want to be in a room with 20 people. So you can naturally, organically spread yourselves out. So if you want a space to meet with your organization, the rooms are here on the slide. If you'd rather just work with a group of other soloists, you can hop into rooms 37 and 42. And if for some reason your org is not listed here, right? Maybe you guys registered later, or maybe not as human and I overlooked one. Rooms 42 through 50 would be a great place. Just pick a room and your team is welcome to convene there. So again, we'll take about 10 to 12 minutes to have you all looking at those school design structures and debriefing. And my ask is that you come back with a question to ask our panelists to close us out today. So with that, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. And this is, as I mentioned, it's going to be a little different. It's not going to automatically place you in. So if you look down by your mute button, there should be a 2x2 grid of squares. So it's like 4 squares. If you click on that, you should be able to select the breakout room that is most applicable to your context. And we'll see you back here in about 12 minutes. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you had some productive meaning making in those breakout sessions and were able to capture some notes in our webinar workbook series, or rather our webinar series workbook. But with that, I know me personally, as soon as I make meaning with someone else, I think of really good questions. So I want to create some time and space for you all to pose those questions to our panelists. And you can do that using the Q&A feature in Zoom if you're familiar with it, or you are more than welcome to put it in the chat. We've got time for 2 or 3 questions to pass along to Eric and Brianna. Let's see what's on your mind. Thanks, Alex. We've got our first question. How might these leaders and their district systems define success through the lens of sustainability? Was or is there a sustainability plan in place to ensure that the impact sticks beyond the current leaders? So Eric or Brianna, either of you guys want to jump into sustainability and your plan for such?
I feel like Eric and I are looking at each other like, who's gonna go?
I couldn't tell if your smile meant you were going to go or not.
I mean, I can jump in. Really, speaking from the site, it was really important that, again, the work is driven by our teachers, our staff, and our students, and that there were systems put in place so that regardless to the person that came in or the person that left, those systems and that process would continue. And we've had conversation about that as well, is that it's really important that the work continues and they drive the work. And so when it's not the leader coming in with an agenda, it's the school and the students doing that work continues. I will say our district also has a very strategic and intentional plan of all of our schools within EUSD doing redesign. And so we're kind of one of those early adopters in that process. So they are very much so looking at that and ensuring they are partnered with LCC. And LCC does a brilliant and amazing job just coming in and coming alongside all of our leaders as well as our community and doing that redesign work on a big scale as well as at the site-based level.
Yeah, and having actually left the school and being, 3 times beyond in the journey of where Bree's school is at, I would say she is exactly right. And so when she doubles down on teacher leadership, that is what was the fulcrum of continued success and popularity and achievement for our school. Even when the leader leaves, it can't be a cult of personality that sustains a building. It has to be actually built-in structures. I heard once, and I disagree with this, that a former boss of mine I had in a different life said that the real tell of a leader is that things continue when they're gone. And it's not the tell of that leader, it's the tell of the organization and the culture and how it's set up. It can never be about a person. And as soon as it is, that's a trapdoor for failure.
Oh, stellar answers to a very good question. I'm seeing a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A feature asking about the most innovative thing, idea, specific that you ever tackled. And Eric and Brianna, I wonder, I know you had different contexts. Eric's was an entire school, Brianna, yours was a micro school. But what's the coolest thing that your teachers have done or students have done so far?
Those are great questions. I would say it's some of it now because like we're a little past time, but when in 20 so prior to the pandemic, we even at the launch of the school, we've been focused on this idea of how might we prepare kids for futures that are unknown, the rapidly changing economy, all the things. And we spent a lot of time getting teachers out into industry because we have this problem in American public education where people who are good at school go to school so that they can play school as adults for their career. and they don't actually know what is happening, and they don't have all the signposts. So we invested a lot in that. And in 2021, we started teaching 2 different AI courses. And the reason why that was a big deal then is AI, it was prior to ChatGPT, anything AI related was blocked. And so what we had to do is, how do we develop our own way of teaching about large language models, using natural language with the machine learning, without access to those actual technological tools. And so one of our teachers, because we were like, all teachers like, go, whatever your thing is, go and figure it out. And Mike Iben was able to do that for us.
So I would say, honestly, because we're in the infancy stages of this, I'm actually just excited to see what innovative things our students and our staff come up with this coming year. We've again been trying to put additional systems in place to provide opportunity for that innovation to happen. Our students and our staff are really big on wanting college and career. So we've put together, we worked with a group called Pax Patent, and that has 10 different types of colleges and careers, from barbering and cosmetology, because our kids were huge on wanting to do that. They get hands-on experience doing that, drones, veterinary care, all kinds of great things. We also are in the process of putting together, it's funny, Eric's talking about that, an innovation lab. So really a space where you can do all kinds of different things that will ebb and flow, and doing the overlay of like AI. But I'm really also excited for my micro school team to maybe dig into seeing what a youth court would look like on our campus. I think that it is going to be really cool to see if we can actually have that come to fruition on our campus. We've got a lot of the systems and different things in place, and I just think that would be another layer of some cool things. So
Amazing.
Jump in on that one, Britt. Having seen both of these leaders, like Brianna earlier said, say yes to as much as you can. And I think so many of the great things that have emerged at Hidden Valley and Vita are because of that mindset. And so in the early days, Vita was, I think, the first Verizon Innovative Learning School in the country. They had a partnership with Qualcomm. They explored all kinds of opportunities that were outside the box. And I see Brianna and Hidden Valley doing the same thing, saying yes to things that schools don't traditionally do. And not all of them work beautifully at the beginning. But if you have good design principles, you hold your outcomes firm, but your strategy's flexible, you can learn from those things, and you adapt and you grow. And so I think really a hard thing for leaders to do is to say yes to what's possible. And even, as a superintendent, I've written about how it was hard to say yes to a design thinking school at Vita because I'd never heard of it before. It was so out of the box. And so trusting your people, trusting your community, trusting the wisdom of young people is something that is a challenge for leaders. But when you do that, then just amazing things emerge and anything becomes possible.
Cannot think of closing out on a better sense of than listening to your community, listening to your young people, and building from there. Amazing advice. Thanks, Devin. Without we're winding down our very first, I don't know about you, but I learned a ton, and I would love to get your feedback. So I'm going to launch a Zoom poll in just a second, but let me share my screen to make sure I'm giving you all the visuals before I do that. All right, let's hop on over here. Perfect. So we've got a lot of resources that we have available, and we'll plan to make available through a recap email to you after this webinar, including things like the slide and our webinar workbook, but also links about the schools that you've heard about today. If at any point there are additional resources you'd like to have, we have no shortage of them. Just let us know. I'm happy to send anything along outside of the webinar series, or you can visit us at learnercenter.org and click on the Learn and Network tab. Lots and lots of things available there for you. Wanted to just flag a couple things coming up. As Devin said, every Monday for the next 4 weeks, starting today, we will be talking about school design, same time, same place. And in September, we will be really leaning into designing the future of education. We're looking at the opportunity to potentially bring people together to visit an innovative school system, to go to a place that has been intentionally redesigned. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out. And then also in October, we will be at the Aurora Institute. So if you're planning to attend that conference, we'd love to see you. Come say hi, take a selfie, and we want to hear your story. With that, I mentioned I want to get your feedback. So let me launch my Zoom poll. This is going to be a good experiment to see how this Zoom poll works. All right, so you should get a very, very quick 3-question survey. Just love to hear how today's webinar went for you so that we can make next week even better. All right, thank you all. To those of you who have completed the poll, I'll leave it open if you're still typing in your thoughts. I just want to offer to stay in touch until next week. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to email, reach out on social media. We are looking forward to seeing you next Monday. Have a great week, everybody.